So hello, welcome to another face reading caricature. This week I've decided to do Piers Morgan, and I guess the thing I find interesting about people like Piers Morgan is despite all their success and their fame and their money and everything, there always seems to be a kind of sadness, and even in this picture here there's this sort of sad kind of look in the eyes. They don't seem ever happy or satisfied. You know, I'd imagine most people, if they were successful and they were doing what they loved doing, they would sort of walk around feeling quite happy with themselves. But there's something quite pensive and pent up about him, and we notice this in these tight small lips, these sad little eyes here. There's also another few little interesting bits and bobs. I don't know if you can see this here on his earlobe. In fact, there's like a little fold on his earlobe, and we can see it. Where else was it? Ah, here we are. This is a much better picture of it. We've got this kind of, and he's got it on both his earlobes, this little kind of line on his earlobe. This can be a sign of blood pressure irregularities, or sometimes in Chinese medicine it was seen as a sign of a heart problem, or the onset of a potential heart problem. I notice these kind of pictures here, this one in particular, there's just something so sad about him. You know, if you saw him in the street, you wouldn't think that this was some successful journalist who had this life of privilege and just managed to fail upwards. No matter what's happened to him in life, he's always managed to land on his feet. Like when he was sacked from being the editor of the Daily Mirror, partly for rigging share prices and also for publishing faked photographs. He ends up going to America and hosting the Larry King Show. When he gets sacked from there due to dreadful ratings, he comes back to England. He's a host on Britain's Got Talent, I think it was, or one of those sort of programmes. And then most recently, he's been the host of GMB until he recently stormed off. And again, like, he storms off over some silly argument over Meghan Markle. And you think someone successful and someone his age, a family man, he's got a couple of kids, he's happily married. Why does he get so worked up that some woman, probably not even half his age, doesn't want to keep in contact with him because she's gone off to get married? Why does that affect him? We notice some interesting things here, these saggy bits that sort of hang over the eyelid, sort of like the upper eyelid hanging down. This is a sign of someone who's taken on board criticism and he's never been able to let it go. Normally, if it happens on the right-hand side, it's criticism that he's received from a significant woman in his life. So it could be a mum, an ex-partner, a teacher. If you have it on the other side, the left side, it's criticism he's received from a significant man in his life. So this could be obviously a father, teacher, colleagues. So he's someone that's received criticism and doesn't let it go. He does not let it go. Something else I noticed. Oh, there we are. What have we got here? This is called a pain line. It's a diagonal line that comes down from the outer eye down towards the nose. This is a sign of someone that holds on to pain, both physical and emotional. So you can sort of see that. This is a guy that bears grudges. He's not happy at all. We've also got these absolutely pensive, tight little lips. Someone that just does not like to deal with emotions whatsoever. But there is an interesting thing about his mouth, which we'll come back to in a moment. So, what can we see on his divided face? If we know that the two right sides are his public face, the yin side, and the left side is his private face, the yang side. We notice on the right hand side that he's got a much squarer chin. This is someone who wants to present himself as having a lot more willpower and strength than he really does. He also has a much wider bridge to the nose here. That's a sign generally of physical strength, whereas on the other side it's much weaker, much smaller. The chin isn't as square, it's actually quite narrow, which could be a sign of permissiveness or not always having the courage of his convictions. Another interesting thing, the mouth on the right hand side, it's much more ostensibly happy. He's showing that he's a happy person, whereas on the private side he's less expressive with his happiness. So he wants to be seen as obviously stronger than he really is, wants to be seen as happier than he really is, he wants to be seen as physically stronger than he really is. Another interesting mark was here, and I don't know if you can see this very well. I saw this and I thought, wow, that's a transformation line. That's incredible. This is an amazing thing for people to have. This is a sign that someone's gone through some kind of massive transformation in their life. Often it was believed if someone had faced the long, dark night of the soul and they came out the other side as a better person, they'd have this kind of mark on their face. And I thought, I don't know of Piers Morgan having any kind of spiritual or religious or political kind of revelation in his life. He's always seemed to me the sort of guy who's just born into privilege and he just always fails upwards. Nothing can stop him. Similar to like the Boris Johnsons of the world, the Donald Trumps of the world. This is a guy who can't fail, no matter how dreadful he is. So how did he get this transformation line? And it was only by Googling I realised it wasn't a transformation line at all. It's a scar that he received after he was punched in the head by Jeremy Clarkson in 2004 at some sort of award ceremony or something. Clarkson, again, is another one of these guys that's sort of born into privilege and just seems so miserable about it. This kind of fascinates me. In our culture we're under the belief that material well-being gives us kind of internal well-being, and it's never the case. We see it time after time, but yet we're kind of primed to believe that success and avarice is kind of our path to fulfillment. So yeah, this isn't a transformation line at all. If you want to see a good example of a transformation line, we look at Anthony Hopkins, and he's got a massive transformation line here, and you can even see it here in this photo. Very prominent, and we know that he's been through a transformation. This is a guy who he used to be an atheist, then he became a devout Christian. I think he became a believer in God when he was an alcoholic, and he went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they sort of put him on this path. So he gave up alcoholism, he became religious, and this is why you see this kind of mark on his head. So that's a true transformation line. And again, it doesn't have to be necessarily a religious transformation. It could be a spiritual transformation, it might be a political transformation. So Piers Morgan's transformation line isn't a transformation line, it's just a scar that he got in a pissed up punch up with Clarkson. So let's do some scribbles. You can see he's got a rectangular head. This is a sign of someone. Often politicians or members of the aristocracy were believed to have these kind of oblong sort of heads, these not oblong, like rectangular kind of heads. Another thing to notice is Piers Morgan, he's actually got a thicker upper lip than he does a lower lip. So if someone's mouth is kind of this sort of shape, where it's, say, like if this is their mouth, this is the mouth shape, and it's actually the upper lip which is kind of thicker than the bottom lip. This was the sign of someone who was a drama seeker. They like to make a big deal out of things, and we see this with Piers Morgan, especially most recently, him storming off Good Morning Britain after a little disagreement with the weatherman, I believe it was. He likes to. These are the sort of people that even if they're slightly ill, they're convinced that they're dying. They like to make a big deal out of it. If he gets the mildest headache, he'll swear he's coming down with an aneurysm or a brain tumour or something. So he's very much a drama seeker. We know this about him anyway. And we can see he's kind of got these quite squinty little eyes, quite small eyes, which is a sign of someone who's very, very reserved, doesn't like to reveal too much of themselves. They're often very private sort of people, but it means that they're quite good analytical thinkers. So you can kind of see that if we try to get that in his eye shape here. Also, people with sort of squinty eyes sometimes find it hard to trust people. So you've got these big jowly bits. His ears are quite flat against his head, which is surprisingly means he's a very good listener. I wouldn't have really guessed that of Piers Morgan. I would have always thought, judging by some of his interviews, how he likes to, when he's interviewing someone, he sort of sees himself as being the most important voice in the room. We can see again this kind of little sign where he sort of bites into his lip, and I've tried to sort of incorporate that into my little caricature here. Again, someone who's sort of holding back their emotions, very pensive, very tightly bound kind of person. Another kind of thing I noticed actually before I go on is there does seem to be more markings on his right hand face, but this is more to do with the photo. Generally speaking, there's more markings on the left hand side because this is where we hide our emotions, and on this particular picture it looks like his left hand side doesn't have many lines on it. But if I looked at another photo, again the original photo of this I couldn't really use because he's got his head sort of turned at an angle, so it's not a really fair photo to use. So you get these very disparate looking characters, but we can see here that the lines are much more evenly distributed on both sides of his face here. On this photo it looks like he's got more lines on his public face than his private face, but it's just the way that this photo's been augmented afterwards. A lot of these publicity, in fact all publicity photos have been through Photoshop. They've been handed to a graphic designer before they're made public, so that's why maybe it looks like he's got more lines on his right hand side. Right, so we've got this massive forehead, and then he's got this kind of big fat sort of jowly face, which I feel I should be exaggerating more as part of a caricature. But this was often seen as a good sign. The ancient Chinese saw this kind of chubby face as a sign of being able to provide, being able to look after yourself. It was a sign of wealth. In our society now, like, chubbiness is something most people are ashamed of. Most people are trying to lose weight. In ancient China it was seen as actually a positive thing, you know. It was sometimes referred to as money bags. These kind of big jowl kind of areas were referred to as money bags. It was a sign of someone who was obviously very successful and could feed himself very well. So I think I'll kind of leave it there for today. Tried to capture his kind of squinty, kind of sad kind of eyes. The mouth, we've got this sort of pensive mouth where the teeth are actually biting into the bottom lip, which is an interesting kind of thing for somebody to do. It's someone who's holding back a lot of emotions. I added a few accessories, I thought, because I thought of his scar. And then when I decided to add his skull, I thought of the little nuts and bolts we sometimes see on Frankenstein. So it kind of gave me the look of almost like a Frankenstein's monster. I can't put the bolts on his neck though, because he hasn't really got a neck. So I've had to, if I was to add them on, I'd have to stick them onto his kind of jowls. But that's just being silly. This is, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, he's just a fascinating kind of character. People like him, Jeremy Clarksons, Boris Johnsons, the Donald Trumps, these sort of people that are born into wealth and they're very successful, but they just don't seem happy. And again, if I go back to the picture I had back here, where is it? It's just such a sad picture of him. This one, just such a sad looking man. You wouldn't think that this was a successful person. You wouldn't think that this was a millionaire. You wouldn't think that this was a guy who was so well connected he can never fail. And I just wonder what it is about the sort of sadness in some people. I don't know. So it just goes to show. In fact, there's an interesting quote I came across, and it was something along the lines of, sometimes people are so poor that all they have is their money. And I guess that kind of sums up the sort of, you know, the Trumps, the Piers Morgans, these Boris Johnson type characters. So a lesson for us all there, that wealth, fame, money, the trappings, the ostensible trappings of success, are not the way forward at all. You know, it really does have to be, fulfillment really does have to be something that comes from within. So I hope that's the lesson we can all walk away with. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And subscribe if you want to be kept updated on future face reading caricatures. Goodbye.
The tragic tale of a 2-ton hippo who swallowed a tennis ball in Germany.
Surely you must have covered that in the Daily
Yes,
Mirror.
you're not doing
That's
very well
exactly
on
a
these,
page
are you?
5 story.
What do you know about newspaper editing, Clive?
About as much as you do.
Dear, oh dear, Clive.